Hello and welcome to the Leader Breeder Podcast with myself and your host, Aidan Jeffrey. Leader Breeder Podcast is a leadership podcast dedicated to helping you discover and develop your leadership voice in your life, career, ministry, and business. And for this month's episode, the March episode 33 already, we are talking from Wobble to Wow. How stable is your organization stable? Last month in February, I spoke to us about output versus outcome, and I want to build upon that message from last month and continue on this journey of challenging us to understand how stable is our organization stable, how stable is our church stable, how stable is our department stable, certain things on a table that makes it stable, the four legs. So I want to look at the four legs of a stable table and challenge us in this month to perhaps think of things we might not have thought of before, things we're going through, things I'm going through, things that I'm challenging myself in to make my own church table stable. So come on, super excited to be with you this month. Episode 33 from Wobble to Wow. I'm going to see you on the other side of this. Well, episode 33 already, like I said, our March episode, and super excited to be talking to you for the few minutes we have together today. I want to just remind us again, Proverbs 24 verse 3 in the Living Bible, the Bible says that any enterprise is built by wise planning, becomes strong through common sense, and profits wonderfully by keeping abreast of the facts. Now, I've shared this scripture verse a few times over the last few months. Any enterprise, business, a church, a country, a government, whatever it might be, is built. How? By wise planning, becomes strong through common sense, which sometimes isn't often that common, and profits wonderfully by keeping abreast of the facts. And the facts are changing. I wrote a book of I think it was in lockdown or post-lockdown, I'm not too sure, called The Exponential Church, and it was based on the book, The Exponential Organization or Exponential Organizations. And I spoke about how technology will disrupt the way we do church and what to do about it. And I see it more and more. I see it not just in the church, but I see it in the corporate sector, dealing with business owners on a regular basis, on a weekly basis, taking questions, sometimes counseling people that are going through battles or challenges. And very often it's not because they've suddenly become bad business owners or bad pastors or bad leaders. It's because things are changing. And the Bible says we have to keep abreast of the facts. And the facts are that things are evolving quicker than in previous decades, previous generations. So we have a responsibility to stay abreast of the facts. And verse 5 says, Proverbs 24, a wise man is mightier than a strong man, and wisdom is mightier than strength. So sometimes we're strong in areas for seasons, and then suddenly we start to see, but what's causing me not to be as strong as what I used to be? And the Bible's very clear. It says that a wise man, wisdom, brings success. And verse 6 says, don't go to war without wise guidance. There is safety in many counselors. So counselors in people, counselors in books, counselors in information, counselors obviously as Christians, Christian business owners, from the wisdom of God, from the Holy Spirit, from the presence of God. But as we're talking about this month's episode, from Wobble to Wow. Sometimes we, like I said, we're strong and suddenly we're feeling, but why is this table wobbling? Now, we've all been to restaurants where we've sat in a restaurant and that one leg in the one corner is unstable, and you sit down, and as you press down to rest your arms or perhaps, push your plate down or put the coffee down, as you lean on it, it wobbles and the coffee wobbles. Well, what do? Either we call the waiter and say, hey, this table is unstable, or we start to look around and we grab a little piece of the sugar and 2 pieces of sugar, or we feel underneath the table and we see there's a little screw with a leg extension on it, and we start to unscrew and screw, and sometimes we're on our hands and our knees. And why is it that when we're sitting in a restaurant and the table is unstable, and knowing that we're going to go into a meal or into a time together with friends or family, the last thing we want to do is have an unstable table? Why? Because that's going to ruin the whole experience. And sometimes they can serve you a great meal. Restaurant brings out excellent food, but you go back and you say, what a bad experience. Why? Because every time I tried to eat my meal and somebody on the other side of the table was trying to eat their meal, we were on opposite sides, and they were pushing, we were pushing, and the table was rocking backwards and forwards. And eventually I was so focused on the unstable leg of the table that I actually forgot to enjoy the meal. Now, isn't that true for us as well? very often in the church that I pastor or in a business that you might be running. Sometimes we can be so focused on the instability of the legs or not even realizing that the legs that are unstable are causing us to become more focused on what we shouldn't be, and we're not really enjoying the stuff we're serving on top of the table. And when you go to a restaurant where the table is stable, atmosphere is nice, the ambiance is nice, you leave there going, wow, what a great meal. And the discussion becomes the meal. The discussion becomes the fellowship. The discussion becomes the laughter and the friendship. But when the table is unstable, the discussion becomes the table. And sometimes we're discussing, all our frustrations, our business frustrations, our department frustrations, or our church frustrations, or why we're not seeing, what we thought we should be seeing. And sometimes it comes back to a simple thing, common sense. Like Proverbs 24:3 says that any enterprise is built by wise planning, but becomes strong through common sense. And sometimes it's just a common sense thing to go back and say, what is causing this instability? So that's what I want to focus on for this month's episode, from wobble to wow. How do we get our table to stop wobbling, and how do we start to hit the win? Where we start to go, wow, we're really starting to see great results. And I want to just focus on 4 legs from the perspective of who does what by when that we spoke of last month. We spoke about the fact that we have outputs and we have to create value, that we have to change behavior in order to get an outcome. Now, those could be the 4 legs, and I'll make those also part of the discussion in this month's episode. But if we look at the first leg or the second leg or the third leg or the fourth leg, from an OKR perspective, from an objective and key result perspective, we want to focus on getting an outcome. So if the outcome is just to stabilize the table, then that should become an OKR. What is our objective? Stabilize the table. What are the key results in order to get it a stable table? Well, 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to have 4 key results, 4 things we have to focus on in order to get that outcome we desire. And what is the objective? To bring stability to the table. Could be a sales objective, could be a marketing objective, could be a logistics objective, it could be a growth, there's many facets to running a business or any organization. If you want to go back onto Leader Breeder a few months ago, I did a podcast on the 7 disciplines of organizational success. And that is a great listen as well, just to see what are the 7 things that we also have to understand, the 7 disciplines as leaders we have to make sure are in place. Our vision discipline, our marketing discipline, our financial, our HR. There's different levels of different things that have to run simultaneously. That's why being an entrepreneur is so complex. Being a pastor, being a set man. Sometimes I speak to young pastors or I speak to young leaders, and they're frustrated and they're going, I'm doing my best, I'm trying my best. But I want to say to you, yes, thank you for trying your best. But it's a very complex thing to be a set man running a country, running an organization, a church, a ministry, running a business. So that's why I say to you, we have to keep, developing our treasures, growing our understanding, stop being lazy learners and start becoming, intentional learners, 10 pages a day. Keeping abreast of the facts. What are the things that are shifting and moving? Now, when you are in an instable or unstable world, if your table is unstable, we don't even have time to actually see what's over the hill. We don't have time to see what's coming up in the next 6 months or a year, or what's actually going to come from behind or come from in front. We call it the digital tsunami, the fact that technology is disrupting, and I see it more and more. I look at AI now. We had a small little project at the church recently where we are installing an outside coffee area, and I had to get dimensions, and I had to get engineering dimensions for the roof that we were putting up. So I went to AI and I said, hey, I want to put up this roof, and this is the material I'm using, and I want to put the legs here. I want to try and create this look and feel. What is the furthest distance I can put these 2 legs away from this corner so it doesn't have to have a post, so we can cantilever the 2 corners, etc., etc. And amazed. I mean, pushed and pulled 10, 15 minutes later, I had an answer that an engineer would have had to give me and taken perhaps, a very long time. Now, I'm not saying don't use an engineer. I'm just saying that you can get information on certain things a lot quicker now. You can get answers on things that are accurate and true, and that if tested by a professional or an expert, you'd find, well, that is what it is. And AI is going to assist in getting work done quicker, work done smarter, sharper. They say it's not AI that's going to damage or disrupt your business. It's people that know how to use AI that are going to disrupt and damage a person's business or ministry. When I say damage, I'm talking about affected because they are offering better value. So let's have a look at the 4 legs that I want to focus on in this episode, from wobble to wow. How do we get our table from a wobbling table to a wow table, where it starts where the legs are stable, those things are set, and now we can serve a great service on top. We can serve a great meal. We can offer great products and services in our organization that we are leading. And the first one is, I'm going to simplify this month. Again, it's going to tie in with last month's, but our first leg is the who leg. Now, W-H-O. So who? Who, remember, does what by when. So you can guess the other 2 legs already. Is the what leg, and then it is the when leg, and then the 4th one I'll share in a moment. But I want to say the who leg. Now, we all know that's common sense, and that's the output. I mean, you employ somebody to do what? Well, to do something. Who's going to do this? Okay. Also, I did a podcast a few months ago. You can go and have a listen to it, called Who Before When. So who before when? Well, we go who does what by when. And often we want to get the when, but we haven't really been diligent about the who. So make sure that you have got all your who's, your correct who's in place. And also, if you haven't listened to the series of Soaring with Your Strengths, or the book Soar with Your Strengths that I did a recap on last year in our series Soaring with Your Strengths, go and listen to this, because it's important to understand that you get the right who's, the right people. In Good to Great to Built to Last, they speak about getting the right people on the right seat on the bus. And Jim Collins speaks of, he says that even if you don't know where you want to go, but you have the right people on the right seats, when you find out where you want to go, you'll be able to get there much quicker. Now, easier said than done, because sometimes we start out, in my case, in many of my ventures in the past, church ventures, when I start out the church or start out a business, you haven't got the ability to maybe pay top-notch salaries or get a very highly qualified person. So you use the faithful people. And although the faithful people are faithful, which is commendable, and they're willing to work for less money, there's always a place I found in my experience is that there comes a point when their faithfulness reaches a ceiling, because they haven't just got enough expertise to take you to that next level. And that's always it's sort of not a tough time, but it's you want to be loyal to people and faithful to people, but you realize that the ceiling that they have hit, because one man's ceiling is another man's floor. And so you need to understand that when you get the right people, the people that have a passion for something, the people that, for example, if you're in a sales environment, or most businesses have sales arms because you have to try and grow. But if you're in a sales environment and you have a faithful person who wants to help you grow, but they're not really cut out to be to love people naturally, then you get those people. They actually become depressed when they're not around people, and you want those people to be in the sales part. But at the same token, how skilled are they? I always say, don't kill yourself, but skill yourself. And I say as well, you can improve and you can be faithful and stay studious and learn and study, and you can actually evolve and become a great asset to a company. But sometimes we just find that you've got that person that's not in the right seat, on the right place on the bus, and it's going to limit you until kingdom come. You're going to try your best. And Jack Welch, ex-CEO of General Electric, the late Jack Welch, he made a statement in his book that he wrote as well many years ago, and he said this. He said, fire fast and hire slowly. And he also said this. He said, if you've got to move somebody because of inefficiency or ineffectiveness, he says you've got the wrong person. Now, please, I'm not advocating firing people quickly and hiring slowly, but what he was saying was that if you realize that somebody's not in the right place, he says rather help the person exit that organization and find their own place where they're strong, and then take time in making sure you're hiring the right person. Because if you have the right person, it's going to get done quicker, faster, sharper, and there's going to be a lot less staff meetings around spending most of your staff meeting discussing the weakest links. Whereas if you have a staff meeting where you've got 10 strong points, it's going to be a creative a staff meeting that moves forward. And often I find we spend more time just discussing issues with the weakest links, as opposed to having people coming to tell us what are the latest trends, what are the things that we need to look out for, coming with creative suggestions, creative solutions. And I really want to encourage you as well. So who's the who's? Have you got the right people in the right places within your organization, in your structures as a pastor? Do you have a person who's faithful? They mean well. And very often you find that people, they mean well, but now they need income, and they're not cracking it. They're not doing exactly what they should be doing. They're not hitting those breakthrough Sundays in the church, or they're not hitting those real momentum moments. They're just doing enough just to survive, and just doing enough and being exhausted by the end of the week, because they're not on their sweet spot. And I say this to you again, rather have an open, honest conversation with the who's and see, are you in the right place? Should we exit you? Should we help you find another work? And yes, sometimes departmental moves can help. Sometimes it can. I've seen it work. So I say as well, but if you're going to keep moving somebody because of incompetence or because of bad performance, you must likely have a person who doesn't have a passion for what they're doing. And I would rather encourage you to move those people into a place where they themselves can get up in the morning and be motivated because they have a passion, as opposed to you having to force them to try and stay faithful all the time. So number one, the who, the clarity of roles. Are the roles that the people fulfill within your organization, are they clear? Does everybody know exactly what's expected of them? Or is it open to, I'm going to decide, what I want to do or what I don't want to do, or what I feel is best. When we started looking at the OKR focus again in our world, we started realizing that just from a pastoral perspective, I'll give you an example, 5 pastors and all 5 say, I feel this is the best for my world. And all well-meaning pastors, faithful pastors, good leaders, but they have a choice of what they feel is the most effective route for their structures or their people. However, because of our OKR focus, objectives, and 4 or 5 key results that we've narrowed it down to, everybody now goes into a week focusing on 5 things. Every pastor has to focus on the 5 things, the same 5 things, but broken down into their world. But if the families pastors and the young adults pastors and the youth pastors and the student pastors are all focusing on the same 5 things, guess what? We are going to become a lot more effective organization. And I say this again because recently we experienced one of our biggest Sundays we've had. Now you might say, is it purely because of OKRs? No, not just that. But I can say is when we get together as a staff, immediately when I go to the young adults pastor, or I go to the family pastor, or I go to the student pastor, my conversation is exactly around the 5 things. And I myself am also responsible as the CEO, the Chief Empowerment Officer, the Christ Empowerment Officer. I'm also responsible to contribute towards the 5. Everybody from the top right to the bottom is responsible to contribute towards the 5. Now, which leads us to the second leg, which is the what leg. So who must do what? Those 5 things I spoke about, those objectives and key results. So who does what by when? Now, when you look at the what the factor, it's what is the task, what is expected. And until we don't have in our case, again, an OKR, now you go, but we've got a vision and a mission and a mandate, and we've got a mission statement and a vision statement. And yes, it's critical to have all those in place. But the question is this, is what is the direction in which every staff member is choosing to go in a week? So if you're in sales in an organization out there in the marketplace, you might find that a salesperson is selling maybe the same products but in different areas, but this person feels, these are my main things I'm going to focus on. This salesperson feels these are things I'm going to focus on in my area. So you could have 3 salespeople, all trying to sell the same product, but got 4 or 5 totally different approaches to their week. And sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. But what about the person who's not really getting the results the other one's getting? And you might find that you're now starting to, everything's open to a depends. But when you have objectives and key results, and you say, the who, the salespeople, does what? What are those 4 or 5 things? Now, research shows us in the books Who Does What by When, and the books Measure What Matters, it tells us that until you haven't narrowed it down to 4 or 5, key results with one objective, one overriding objective, and what is the main objective, whatever that is, and we're going to break that down into key results. And the what part is the task, the precision of what we want to achieve. And if you get everybody to move in the same direction, yet in different aspects of ministry. So we've got pastors moving into families. Now, we know the family dynamic is different to a young adult dynamic, which is different to a student dynamic, in our case as pastors. So, for example, if a family pastor goes into a family world and he tells the family world, these are the 5 things we want to try and achieve, the outcomes we want to achieve for 2025, his conversation is going to be the same with sharing what we want to achieve versus a student person going to tell the same 5 things to the student world. Why? Well, a family person has children. They've got businesses. They've got responsibilities. They've got time constraints. They've got different expense outlays for children that are maybe in primary school, high school. Take that across into a young adult's world, a young married couple or a single person, 2 different worlds. Versus a student world, well, parents are paying perhaps, they got pocket money, they got more time. So again, you can have the same key results, the same direction. You want to achieve the same outcome, but we're going to have to use common sense. We're going to have to be creative in different ways in order to make the behavior of the families, the behavior of the young adults, and the behavior of the students to all be able to operate uniquely to their own context. And I say this in your sales world. What is an objective and a key result? What is an outcome-based focus? It's to create value that changes behavior that produces an outcome. So what is the behavior you want of a client? Well, I want them to buy more of our stock. If you're in retail, what is the behavior of your shoppers? Well, we want them to purchase more product. If you are selling to suppliers, you're maybe a distributor or a wholesaler, well, you want those people to buy more stock. So how do we get that behavior to become more intentional or more consistent? Is we as the organization have to create the value. And then that takes a bit of thought. And sometimes we just go through the mundane, and now a salesperson in area 1 using their creativity, but could sometimes be working against exactly what the organization wants to achieve through naivety. And the other person in the other area could be using their creativity, and it's also working maybe against the organization or for the organization. But when we streamline our objectives to 4 or 5 overriding key results, suddenly the creativity is still there, but it's all going to achieve the same result. And I want to encourage you to focus and to think about what I have to say in last month's episode and this month's episode, because it's not just going to be 1, 2, 3 and everything just is going to fall into place. That's definitely not the case. But what I want to say to you is that when you start to understand more and more, is your effort, your output. Remember, it's output versus outcome. And for an output to become an outcome, we have to create value that changes behavior. And then we have to measure that outcome. And I'm going to get to that in a moment. So our second leg is our what leg. So our who leg is the first one. Is that leg stable? Right people in the right places? The what leg, does everybody know exactly what's expected of them? Or is everything open to creative license, own interpretation? Now, again, I don't say, it must be a controlling world or a micromanaging world or a limiting world, because I don't believe in that as well. But I believe you have to have clear, defined roles. Who does what? And then comes to the third leg, which is what? Which is by when. There must be a deadline. And the deadline has to be what? did you achieve that thing you set out to achieve? Now, I want to say this because when we started looking at this as well, is what you'll start to find, what research shows, is that the when part of everything is like, well, here's a reason why I couldn't really achieve that by when. Why? And what research shows is that the staff or the salespeople or whatever department you are now putting OKRs in place for, is they start to move the boundaries. They start to say, well, it's too far. Another guy says, well, it's too close. So what are you saying? Another person says, well, I don't have there, or they've got that, or there's always some reason. That's why before we ask them by when, the deadline, we must make sure that they have agreed that they are actually able to achieve that. So when it comes to the when leg, we want to have a look at the answer should be a very simple yes or no. Now, again, I said the who, soaring with your strength, finding the right people. By what? Clearly defining the roles, the task precision. Do they know exactly what they want to, what you as an organization want them to achieve? Do they have a clear-cut direction to go in? Who does what? What's the what? What's the exact thing I want to achieve? Is it doubling my sales? Is it a 10% increase? Is it reducing the spend? Is it getting the logistics delivered 20% quicker, 50% quicker? Is it whatever that discussion is, the what is, it's got to be thought through, and there's got to be a clear journey. But when it comes to the when, the deadline, what we have to understand is that before we can actually set out and say by when, we must have agreement, consensus from the people that are employed in our organization to say they can first answer a yes and no in the sense of, are you able to achieve that, do you believe, by when? Yes or no. So when we come to the assessment or come to the question of how did it go, did you achieve that, yes or no, we already have an agreement before we started out. Because what starts to happen is we say, everybody who, yes, knows what to do. All right, off you go. Let's do it by the end of the month. Now, everybody goes. 4 weeks go by. We come in. How did it go? Well, I didn't really know that I could do it and now we start to move boundaries. We start to shift boundaries. Why? Because we never actually had a sometimes a painful but a much needed conversation of the deadline. Don't worry about the deadline in the conversation initially, like let's say end of the month or end of the quarter or end of the week or whatever that deadline is. But let's first get back to the point. Can they answer the question with a clear yes or no? Because when it comes to OKRs, you want to know that when it comes to your objective was X, your key results were Y. And when it comes to asking and debating and discussing the key results, did you achieve that objective, that outcome, yes or no? That's it. And if it's no, why? And if it's yes, well done. How did you get that done? Let's share with the rest of the team. But very often, when it comes to, well, I want to talk to you about that. Already we've got a problem there already because it was unclear before they started out on the journey of trying to reach the deadline. So I say to you, don't be in a rush to put the deadline in place too soon. Why? Because if it's going to be too soon, or it's going to be without clear, agreeable yes and no's, you're just going to have the boundary shifting conversation later on as well. So we want to, for example, let me give you a simple example. Let's say, let me use our youth in our church, for example. Let's, for a simple example, as I think now, we'll go to the youth leader and say, all right, who's the who? Okay, you the who, you the youth leader, right? What do we want you to achieve? Well, we want to be in 5 additional schools. We want to have impact in 5 additional schools. We want to see children attending church from 5 additional schools to, let's say, the 5 we already have. Let's assume that's the example. All right. So the who does what? What's the what? We want to be in 5 additional schools. By when? Well, let's first ask the question. Before we talk about the 5 additional schools or the what we want to achieve, do you believe you're able to reach 5 additional schools? Now, have the conversation. Yes, no, why? Push, pull, until we say, all right, I think that you are geared for that. I think you have enough leaders. I think if you multiply enough people, etc., etc. So before they launch out on the 5 additional schools, we already had a conversation about what do you think are some of the things that will stop you or limit you from reaching those 5 additional schools. That's the by when. And when we agree on that, we are actually able to achieve that. We believe by the end of this quarter, we can have footprint into 5 more schools if that's the what. Now, once we've agreed on that and they've seen that they're able to achieve that, you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you, that they then say, all right, now let's go and look at the creative applications. What is the value we must create in order to change the behavior of children in schools that aren't coming to the church? Remember that we've got to get those children to behave contrary to what they're currently behaving like. Firstly, they might not know us. Secondly, they might not be attending the church. So we have to go and create value, whatever that is, in the area of that particular person's responsibility, youth or young adults or students or sales or research, marketing, administration, whatever the area is. We then first have to get that. Do you believe you can achieve that outcome by that date? Right? Yes. Okay. Now let's first see what are some of the limitations. Let's discuss it. And once we've pushed and pulled that through a few conversations, they said, yes, we believe we can. Now we can start to say, right, by the end of the quarter. And then we can, when the end of the quarter comes, the conversation is not, now we're going to hear about, I didn't have enough leaders, or it was too far, it was too near, I was overextending myself. Remember, we've already had that conversation. We had the overextension, we had the leaders, we had all those conversations before the time. We might even find, in the case example I used with the youth, that we say 5 additional schools, that in the conversation of, do you think you can do it, yes or no? Well, why? Well, I've got too few leaders. Well, that might become the next, who does what? Well, now go and spend, okay, do you believe you can raise up 3 more leaders by the end of the quarter? So we might delay or move the 5 new schools by 1 more quarter. Why? Because we identified we've got a leadership shortage. Now we're going to make raising the new leaders the goal. And it's just a common sense approach to moving towards an outcome. But when it becomes this, well, you're a salesperson, go and get more sales. Whatever, that's open to creative license. And sure, I think we should, if a person's employed as a salesperson, is get more sales, and they come back and they're like, wow, we're amazed you got all these new sales. Sure, I think that should definitely be able to be done without having to spoon feed people. But I'm talking about moving from outputs to outcome. Now, what most people do is they'll say, well, I went to see those the 24 customers you gave me on that list. Output. Well, I dropped off our latest specials from the discount offerings from the organization. Well, I did do my kilometers that you said I should do. Well, I did see my 12 new clients per day. And these are all the kinds of outputs that employees will use and say, well, I'm doing what you're telling me to do. But that's not what we said. We said, what is the outcome? We want to send you to go to get new sales, but we want to see a 20% growth by the end of quarter 1. Now we talk in a different language. Do you believe you're able to achieve that 20%? Go and think, go and push, go and pull. Come back and tell us. Yes, I'm able to achieve. How are you going to achieve that? Well, this is right now, go and do it. So when the end of the quarter comes, did you reach the 20%? Yes, no. That's the simplicity of it. It's not a long debate now. It's a simple yes or no. So the when leg has to be a discussion of yes or no. Did you see the 5 schools by the end of the quarter? Yes or no? Remember, we said we were able to achieve it. What do you believe limited you from achieving it? Or, wow, you got 8 schools. Congratulations. You overextended yourself. You did more than what was expected of you. So I say again, before we set out the who, the first leg, does what, the clear, precise tasks that are needed, by when, have the conversation of the yes and no before we actually put the date there. Once we agree on that, we say, right, end of the month, end of the week, end of the quarter, end of the year, whatever that deadline is. So by the time it comes to the 4th leg of the win, which is the win leg, did we win? Yes or no? Or did we lose? Yes or no? Now, the 4th leg is win. So who does what by when for the win? and the win is going to become the wow. And when we win, more often than when we are losing, we're going to go, wow, what an incredible year. We're going to go from wobble to wow. How stable is your organization stable? So I want to say to you, no matter whatever the organization is, we have to be intentional to have these discussions. Sometimes, when I say uncomfortable discussions, but not uncomfortable, just truthful, honest, direct discussions when it comes to measuring what matters. We have to be able to have measurable outcomes. Can we measure the things that matter? And we are the ones that determine that. So I've seen in our world as well, since we've started having these discussions, one of our departments, there was a lot of frustration in that department. We were always, sort of having sort of more loggerhead discussions because they were frustrated, I'm frustrated, and we're not really seeing the traction we want. And since we started to have these conversations, well, let's have a conversation. What's stopping you from achieving that? A, B, C, D, E. Yes. Some of it was boundary shifting, and then some of it was just organizational, sort of bad structuring of why is it like that? I don't know, it just is like that. It became like that. So I had to move a few things. We shifted a few things. I instructed things to be changed slightly because this certain department was being hamstrung in the way the organization had been set up. Even that just became we just found a little challenge in an organization that just had developed over time, but wasn't really just being discussed. And then we've said, well, what do we want to achieve in this area, that area? And suddenly the creativity started to flow. Now there's all kinds of creative discussions. There's a much easier flow coming now, simply because we went and we had the when I say painful, not negative, but sometimes just the painful, having to discuss what are the things that you see would potentially stop you from not being able to achieve that what that we want to achieve. So who does what by when? So who? Get the right people. By what? Get the clear task expectations, precision of tasks, the KRs, the clear things. By when? And before we actually measure the when, have the conversation of, are you able to do that, yes or no? Right, let's discuss. If it's no, let's discuss it. What do you, until we push, pull, what do I need? Well, I can't do it because I haven't got enough petrol allowance. I can't do it because, all right, well, let's adjust the petrol allowance. So once you've adjusted the petrol allowance, based upon what you say you need in order to get the job done, suddenly we found the person was able to, do double what they were doing. Or after everything they said, there was still no movement. There was still no sales. But we can now measure it because they agreed to it before we set out, and they said they believe they can achieve that by the end of the quarter. And when the end of the quarter came, now we realize the person is just what? They're just shifting boundaries again. And then we can deal with that accordingly. But once we have this conversation, it streamlines everything so much. And knowing that when you get to a meeting, we're all having the same conversation around the same 5 things. We're not having, speaking to 10 people, but when they leave there, it's open to 25 directions because there's just not a clear what that's in place. So that's my encouragement for us this month. And I want to say to you as well, this isn't something that's just going to be easy, but I realize most organizations, when I counsel people in our church and I counsel business people and I talk to business people, most of their frustration is not they're bad business people, but their frustration is that the direction in which their focus is all over the show. It's in a direction year and year and year. Why? Because you can. So if I feel today I want to see these 4 clients and I get there, then I get distracted with, the guy started talking about rugby and then we ended up having a lunch and then the lunch extended itself and, I can justify that I had output. I did see the guy and I feel good about my day because I saw one guy. But that's not what we agreed upon. We agreed upon moving this thing by 20% by the end of the quarter. So I then have to determine if I'm going to spend all my time just having casual meetings with people, but not actually knowing what is expected of me from the outcome to measure what matters, it's just going to become a very much an output-based world. And that's why most organizations, governments, companies, organizations either end up, drifting away from the main thing or becoming top-heavy, They become busy, but they're not effective. And I really believe that if you take to heart the few thoughts or the few challenges I've placed before us, look at the few metrics that have to move in your organization, I do believe that you could move your organization into a much greater outcome-based world versus an output-based world. Because all of us everything starts with an output. You can't get an outcome without starting with an output. But can we move that output into what? What by when? And when we can understand that, who does what by when? What value must I create in order to change the behavior of someone in order to achieve an outcome? So if you're not seeing the outcomes, if you're not seeing the sales, you're not seeing the profit, you're not seeing whatever it is, it's because the behavior is not yet moving. And the reason the behavior is not moving is because the client base doesn't feel that there is enough value there. And that's what I want to encourage you with. If you're a pastor listening to this, you're in a church, you're not seeing your kids' church grow, you're not seeing your income grow, you're not seeing your attendances grow, it's because people don't see enough value to change their behavior to come to church more often. Or they're not seeing enough value in the kids' church to bring their children, for their children's behavior to change, to get out of bed to come to kids' church. Or if there's not enough value in the church, they don't see the need to, contribute financially towards the church. All those are aspects that you have to ask yourself the question, who, me, the pastor, does what, by when, and I have to bring that value. I have to bring that change. So come on. I'm super excited for this month's episode. I know it's a lot of information. Listen to this again. Share this with your world. It's free. Leader Breeder is a platform that has been designed to help discover and develop our leadership voices. And I trust that these monthly episodes are going to be insightful and are impactful, and that you can glean and gain something out of them. Really, I would appreciate some feedback, and if you're able to tag me on my private social medias or on Leader Breeder, but share this with your world. Sometimes we think, well, I listen to this and it's great, but what about many other people out there? We're simply just here to help people. So come on, have a great, great, great month. May March be an incredible month for you. May you see supernatural favor, multiplication, and as you streamline your world, as you get the focus back, as you ask yourself the question, who, the leg on the table, does what, by when, for the win. And I guarantee you, when those four legs are nice and stable and they're operating like a well-oiled machine, that tabletop is going to be stable, and you're going to see a lot more sales, a lot more profit, a lot more customer satisfaction, and you yourself are going to see a lot less stress, a lot less of many things, because sometimes stress is caused by being all over the show but not focused. So come on, I know you can. I believe in you. I know God believes in you. So come on, may you have a great, great, great month further. And I can't wait to see you in the April edition of Leader Breeder. Be blessed in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you for joining us here at Leader Breeder. Make sure to subscribe to the channel to catch the next episode every month.